The next two videos are going to be a bit different. They're not going to be about specific movies or a bunch of movies in a genre. They're going to be about a whole bunch of different things. My friend Andrew Pearce over at thecurb.com.au, a movie website I recommend you really should get to and check out the reviews and interviews that he's got there. He did a 40-question thing for Twitter where basically you find out about someone's movie tastes by them answering 40 questions. I asked Andrew if I could borrow it and he said yes. So this video is the first 20 questions and answers for that particular movie quiz. And it was a lot of fun to do. And one of the things about these kind of movie quizzes is you will probably change your answers every year or so, because as you watch more movies, as you change, your taste in movies changes. And so you'll get different answers to most of the questions over a period of time. And that makes it kind of interesting for me. I'm doing this partly as a way of me just kind of seeing where my head's at as far as movie watching is concerned. Question 1, favourite movie. This is a hard one to answer because it depends on your mood. And if you've seen a lot of films, you probably have a pocket full of favourite movies. Now, if we're talking about movies, I'm going to have to go with The Bad and the Beautiful and 2 Weeks in Another Town. 2 movies made with the same actor, Kirk Douglas, and the same director, Vincente Minnelli, over a 10-year separation. One was made in 1952, The Bad and the Beautiful. The other one was made 10 years later in 1962, 2 Weeks in Another Town. I recommend you check those ones out. They are great movies about movies. Now, if we're talking about Australian films, my favourite 2 movies would probably be Newsfront from 1978 and from 1983, An Obscurity, which you can get from Umbrella Entertainment on DVD. A movie called Goodbye Paradise, which is about an attempted coup d'etat in Queensland, one of the states here in Australia. It's hilariously funny and cogent and salient to current politics in Australia in so many ways. Question 2, favourite series. Now, I'm going to take this first off as movie series and then TV series. If it's movie series, because it's been going for all of my film-going life, I started watching movies in 1962. I was born in 57, but I started watching films in 1962. And that's the year the first James Bond film, Dr. No, came out. So I'm going to go with the James Bond series for favourite series. Now, leaving aside the abysmal Roger Moore movies, and yeah, you can discuss that with me on the comments if you want to. Leaving aside the Roger Moore movies, I like the James Bond series. I like the fact that it takes action films upwards every time they make one, with a few exceptions. And I like most of the actors who play James Bond. There are some that I like more than others. I think that Connery and Lazenby and Tim Dalton and Daniel Craig are probably my favourites, with Pierce Brosnan next, and last of all, Roger Moore. But leaving that aside, the James Bond series, if we're talking about TV series, I think I'm going to have to go with genre and go with either the Twilight Zone or the Outer Limits. I think the original Twilight Zone and the original Outer Limits are the series that I keep diving back into, and they're the ones that I think have in some ways had the greatest influence on genre television. Question 3 is the film/series that makes me happy. There are a lot of films that make me happy, but I'm going to go with a couple of musicals, because musicals are kind of, with a few exceptions, designed to make you happy. I'll go with an abysmally bad musical, Peter Bogdanovich's At Long Last Love, with Burt Reynolds singing and dancing in it.
It was just one of those things.
The next one is The Young Girls of Rochefort, Jacques Demy's musical from 1966-67, I think it is, which is beautifully life-affirming. It's got fantastic music by Michel Legrand. It's just a joy to watch, and I was going through a really bad patch about 12, 14 years ago, and I watched it 2 or 3 times as almost a medication. It's just joyous, it's lovely, it's life-affirming, and it has Catherine Deneuve and Francois Dorléac and Daniel Darrieux and George Chakiris and Grover Dale and Gene Kelly in it. So Young Girls of Rochefort is a definite recommend from me. If we're talking about a TV series that makes me happy, I haven't really got one, but I'll go with a movie series that makes me happy, and that is the Tora-san movie series from Japan, where they've got about 38 of these films, all with the same actor playing the same character. I did a video about this, and you can find the link to it up there. TWILIGHT is a hidden gem of a series, and it's just, well, I talked about it in the video I did about it, so go back to that video and you'll find out what it is. Let's see. Question 4. Films and series that make me sad. There are films that make me cry. I mean, and they're not necessarily the ones that should make me cry, with a couple of exceptions. Staying with Jacques Demy, of course, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. If you don't cry at the end of that movie, then you've got a heart of stone. It's just that good of a movie, and it just plays true to emotional truths that we know. So The Umbrellas of Cherbourg is definitely one. The ending of The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, where Theo Kretschmar-Schuldorf is trying to become a refugee in England during World War II. And he's talking to the people interviewing him, talking about how Germany changed with the Nazis coming in. That always gets to me as well. And probably the ending of Will Penny, the Western with Charlton Heston, because it's very sad at the ending. And I think it's probably Charlton Heston's best acting role. But series that make me sad, if we're talking movie series, I think the Death Wish series, but for a kind of tangential reason. I think the Death Wish series is misogynistic and brutal and nasty and doesn't have any redeeming qualities at all. Other people love it, and I totally accept the fact that they do. But for me, that, fridging the wife and the daughter so that some guy can go on a rampage and kill people is not a headspace and not a worldview that I really like very much. Question 5 is movies and series that I rewatch. I rewatch a lot of films, and then I feel bad about it because it means I'm missing out on a new film to watch. But as far as series is concerned, I rewatch the 007 series, the James Bond ones, on a regular basis. Certain aspects of the MCU as well I rewatch. Movies that I rewatch. Here's one that I like to rewatch, but I don't want to rewatch it too much in case it spoils the juice. It's in case it takes away the magic of the film. Probably Fellini's La Dolce Vita I like a lot. It's just so interesting and so deep and so different from so many other films that I can rewatch that. I could probably go back to Tokyo Story as well. Yasujiro Ozu's Tokyo Story. I've done a video about that here. That one I can rewatch as well because it's just got an emotional depth to it that I really appreciate. I watch facile films as well, but they're the two that probably make me look good if I say that I watch them a lot, and I do, but there are a lot of trashy films that I rewatch a lot as well. Question 6 is favourite genre. Science fiction is obviously the most favourite genre for me. I started out as a science fiction fan. I watched a lot of science fiction movies when I was a kid. I still watch a lot of science fiction movies, though they're a glut on the market. There are just so many of them at the moment doing similar things that it's a little hard to love the genre quite as passionately as I did when I was a kid. But science fiction is definitely there. I like westerns too. I think westerns are a format that really stay open to telling different kinds of stories within a certain very narrow period of American history, and a much mythologized and kind of prettied up part of American history as well. And I also like spy movies. Spy movies are great. Spy movies have that kind of antagonism between ideologies that's really interesting. And also their spy movies often show people with incredible skills and very unusual skills. So tradecraft and things like that in spy movies is something that I really like. Let's have a look. Number 7, a special movie for me. Now I looked through this and I've made a list of about 20, but I'm going to go with recommendations one on this one. And the two movies are Ivan Sen's Mystery Road and Goldstone, with Aaron Pedersen playing a police detective called Jay Swan. It talks a lot about Indigenous disenfranchisement in Australia. It talks about Australia in a contemporary way. They're beautifully shot films, and they're also action films. They've got that slow build-up and then some really interestingly and originally framed action in them. So I really like what Ivan Sen does with that. There's also 2 seasons of a Mystery Road TV series with Aaron Pedersen playing Jay Swan again. And they're a recommendation too. You might have to hunt around to find them, but they're definitely interesting kind of contemporary crime dramas told from an Indigenous viewpoint and showing parts of Australia that you don't often see in movies or TV shows. Question 8 is underrated movie. There are so many underrated movies, but I'm going to go with one that's going to come out on Blu-ray quite soon, and I'm going to buy it as soon as it does. It's my favourite New Year's Eve movie. It's Alan Arkush's Get Crazy, which is set in a concert venue, theatre, on New Year's Eve. The concert venue is being threatened by developers, and Max Wolf, the guy who runs it, played by Alan Garfield, is getting all of the old bands back together. And it's made in 1983. It's got Malcolm McDowell playing a Mick Jagger kind of guy called Reggie Wanker. And Malcolm McDowell gets to do some things you don't normally see Malcolm McDowell do. It's a lot of people self-medicate in the movie. It's got Lou Reed in it, and it's just a hilarious comedy. So many great people in it. Ed Bigley Jr., Paul Bartel, Mary Warrenov. If you haven't seen Get Crazy, when the Blu-ray comes out, which has got a lot of extras and a lot of interviews with people who were in the film, it's going to be a real must-get movie. It's just a lot of fun. I remember back in the day when it was on VHS, we used to watch it every New Year's Eve when I was staying with friends in Canberra. We'd have these 4 or 5 day parties at New Year's Eve. And Get Crazy was always watched. It's a lot of fun. Number 9, underrated series. There are so many underrated TV series. You can do your own on that, but I'm going to go with an underrated movie series. And it's the original Planet of the Apes movies, which suffered a lot from 20th Century Fox running it and making the budgets less each movie. It starts out with the Charlton Heston one. Charlton Heston comes into the second one, and then it kind of deteriorates and then shows how the apes came to take over the world. But the interesting thing is the last movie ends on a hopeful note. Unlike the more contemporary Planet of the Apes series, there's ultimately an optimistic grace note at the end of that series. I'm going to have to rewatch those films. They're not great in some cases. They're not well funded. They're made competently, and ultimately it shows that getting along with each other is the way to go. It's an optimistic series, starting out with a very dystopian first film, a second film which destroys the world, and then a time loops back to contemporary times and moves forward from there, which is possibly the first movie series to do that. Interesting kind of breakthrough series, totally different from the Pierre Boulle novel in so many ways, but I think it's worthwhile. Question 10, we're halfway through, is favourite movie from the 1990s. I'm going to go with a few of them. One of them is John Sayles' Lone Star, which is really underrated. I'm going to have to get a copy of that. I've watched it on streaming not too long ago, and it just blew me away again. It's well written, incredibly well acted. If you haven't seen Lone Star, you should check that out. There's also The Player, which is a movie about making movies, and I'm a big fan of movie about making movies. And that one, I'm kind of due for a rewatch of that as well. And I could have gone with something big like The Big Lebowski, of course. That's a 1990s movie as well. But I'm going to go with one that I think is a lot of fun. And it's Small Soldiers. Not the one about the kids in a private school who get taken over by terrorists, but the one with all of the toys that have AI chips in them. Really a lot of fun. I think did Joe Dante make it? I'm going to put something up here to say whether he did or not. But it's a lot of fun, and I think it talks a lot about corporate malfeasance and arseholes and militarization of technologies, but it still does it in an entertaining way. So that one's a lot of fun as well. Number 11. Now, here's where Andrew threw a spin at us. Favourite Indonesian film. There are so many, I could say. Gundala I've talked about, and again, I'll put a link to that there. I've talked about The Raid and Raid Redemption. Also, The Night Comes For Us is really good as well. There's also a really weird movie from the 80s called Lady Terminator. Indonesian cinema is one of those rabbit holes you can dive down and then just have a great time with it. They do tend to focus, at least on the stuff that's accessible, on action cinema. But their action cinema is as good as it gets. The stunt people on those movies must be damaged. They're just shot really well, written really well, and they're borrowing a little bit from things like Japanese and Hong Kong movie culture to a certain extent as far as the plot lines are concerned. But if you haven't seen a Iko Uwais movie, you've really got to enjoy some Indonesian cinema. Really top stuff. Let's move on to number 12. Favourite foreign film. I think he means foreign language film because to Australians, American movies are foreign films. Let's have a look here. I'll go with two that I really like, which are very different movies, and one of which I've seen for the first time recently and one of which I've seen for the first time a while ago. First one, of course, is Seven Samurai, Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. It's just the best getting the band together and beating up the bad guys kind of movie that I know. It's the grandfather of all other getting a group together and beating up the bad guy movies. Every other movie that followed, like The Magnificent Seven, of course, and also things like The Dirty Dozen and the horrible Magnificent Seven remake, all owe so much to Kurosawa. Mifune is great in it, of course, but just the whole team is good. And seeing the history of a culture that's not mine, that then delivers a kick-ass action film, you've got to love that. The other movie I've got is Agnes Varda's Cleo from 5 to 7, which is a story set in 1960s France. It was filmed in the 1960s in France, about a young woman who's a kind of pop singer and model who is just living her life in Paris and wandering around Paris in the hours between 5 and 7 on an evening when she's going to find out about a cancer diagnosis she has. All of the artifice and all of the kind of bullshit in her life gets stripped away in these 2 hours as she moves around, making appointments, meeting up with lovers, breaking up with lovers, seeing friends, and all sorts of other things like that. It's a really beautiful piece of cinema, and if you haven't seen it, I recommend it highly. It's just something special. Number 13 is interesting. Number 13 is Andrew being a bit of a smartass, I think. And that is a movie that makes you sleepy. There's only one you can pick, really. George Pal's Tom Thumb. Just for the sequence with the yawning man. The yawning man always makes me sleepy. And Tom Thumb I like a lot too. Russ Tamblyn playing Tom Thumb. It's got Terry Thomas in it. It's got Peter Sellers in it. I think it's a hidden gem children's movie that people don't talk about enough. And I like it. Funniest movie, there are a few of them, I suppose. The Producers, the original version of The Producers, not the musical version, but the Gene Wilder, Zero Mostel, Dick Shawn version of The Producers is fantastic. People on YouTube are doing reaction videos of young people watching The Producers for the first time and hitting the Springtime for Hitler bit and just being wowed by it. And there's a whole resurgence of young people discovering the cinema of Mel Brooks, which I like a lot. You could go with Blazing Saddles, but I'm going to go with The Producers because I think it's a bit more transgressive in a few different ways. That's one. My other choice is a vulgar pleasure. Step Brothers. Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly together in Step Brothers always cracks me up. I like it a lot. I think some of the other movies they've done together are a bit less wonderful, but I do like Step Brothers. I think they just kind of hit the sweet spot with that one. If you want to go back to classic films as well, things like Preston Sturges's The Lady Eve is great, and Billy Wilder's Some Like It Hot. They got strong recommends from me as well, but they're the ones I find funny. Favourite animated movie / series. Now, animated movie, I'm going with a couple, one of which is Castle of Cagliostro, done by Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli. Lupin the Third movie. There's a new animated Lupin the Third movie, which I haven't checked out. But Castle of Cagliostro I like a lot. It's dynamic, it's fun, it's got some interesting characters, it's got a kind of Japanese version of a European country. The other animated movie is a movie I saw on the big screen when I was a kid, and I think it still holds up well. Some of the songs are pretty good, and it's a bit lateral. Made by Hanna-Barbera. It's a movie called A Man Called Flintstone, which is a Fred Flintstone spy movie. Which is, it's geared at kids, and it's geared very much at the kind of joke level of an episode of the Flintstones. but I think it's a bit of a hidden gem. I'm going to rewatch it soon. I may well do a full video about it. But A Man Called Flintstone is kind of groovy for me. Favourite actor, this is male actor. Jean-Paul Belmondo, Robert Mitchum, I like a lot. Bogart, of course. Jean Gabon, I like Chow Yun-fat. I like Mifune, of course. Just so many I could name. And so many of them that are great. I like Richard Widmark as well. I like Idris Elba. I like Chiwetel Ejiofor. Just so many you could pick from it. It's an almost impossible question to answer, Andrew. Favourite actress? Ava Gardner, because I think that nobody was as sensual on screen as Ava Gardner.
So that's how you fall in love.
Thelma Ritter's great. I've done a whole video about Thelma Ritter, which I'll post there. Helen Mirren's fantastic. Danielle Darrieux is great. And of course, Ida Lupino. So they're my favourites. Movie or series that I always recommend. So this is number 19 of 20. Well, I've recommended the Tora-san series, the Japanese comedies. Let's see, what other series would I recommend? Zatoichi, the Blind Swordsman series, are great, any of those ones. The Ken Clark Eurospy series with Special Missions Lady Chaplin in it. I like that a lot. I've got most of those movies and they're kind of cool, lower budget, Bondy kind of Eurospy movies from the 1960s. So I'd recommend those as well. I've got a lot more series I wouldn't recommend than series I would recommend, but those two I'll go with. This one's kind of easy. This one is dead simple. This one is Duck Soup. And of course, No Time to Die, the new James Bond film. I've been waiting over a year for that one. Really looking forward to it. Series, the MCU Phase 4 movies I'm looking forward to. I want to see Eternals. I want to see Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. And all the movies that follow that. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. All of that kind of stuff. I am locked into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And unashamedly so. I'm going for that roller coaster ride, and I'm going to go with it. I like it. People say that there are too many Marvel movies, but you only get to watch one once every 6 months or so, every 3 to 6 months. So there are a lot of other movies you watch in between then. So I'm fine to go along for the Marvel ride. I was there from the start. I'm going to be there as long as I possibly can. And being a comic book geek from way back, I'm happy with that. So there's the first 20. So thank you very much for watching. On Saturday, you'll get the second 20 of the 40 questions that Andrew posted. I'm going to be posting a link to Andrew's Twitter, which has that particular questionnaire on it. So feel free to answer it for yourself. Thanks to all the Patreon supporters who are increasing in number, which is amazing. You can support the channel by going to patreon.com/Paleo Cinema. So thanks again for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you next time.